All right, kiddos, last two chapters of Fablehaven. I know I'm kind of late getting this on there, sorry. But you know what? During the summer, you guys can catch up on all your Fablehavens, and I will send out an email as soon as these are live on our YouTube. So we have two more chapters left. This chapter is chapter 20, The Vault. Ooh, and the next chapter is The Quiet Box. And that's a very short chapter. Okay, you ready? I'm gonna hold the book like this so I can be a little closer to the microphone. Another stairway spiraled down beyond the open door. More sunstones, brighter than before, lit the way. Warren prodded the steps and found that they were solid. "Kendra," he said, "go erase the lines around a few of the sinkholes nearer the entrance to the room." When Kendra returned, Warren was feeling the pulse in his neck. Perspiration dampened his forehead. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm not doing too bad," he assured her, especially for a guy who just underwent involuntary surgery. Because remember that Minotaur stabbed him? "We have the Minotaur's key. If we shut the door behind us, our friend the Narcoblix will probably have to earn a key of her own." "Okay," Kendra said, stepping into the stairwell with Warren and closing the door. She turned to face him and vanished. "Maybe you should just keep the glove handy for the next threat," Warren said. "It's tough losing track of where you are when we pause." Kendra took off the glove. As long as they were moving around, exploring the tower, it wasn't much of a protection anyway. Slipping it on would be a little more trouble than simply holding still. They descended the stairs for some time, finding no false steps until the final few before the very end. "I like the placement," Warren said, jumping over them and wincing when he landed. He leaned against the wall, one hand clutching his wound. "Just when you assume all the stairs are solid, you plunge to your doom." No door awaited them. Instead, an arched entryway granted access to a broad chamber with a complex mosaic on the floor. The mosaic depicted an enormous battle of primates being waged in tall trees. The perspective was from the ground looking up, creating a disorienting effect. Motioning for Kendra to stay put, Warren entered the room. A second archway on the far side of the chamber appeared to be the only way out. Satisfied that they faced no immediate threat, Warren beckoned for Kendra to follow. The instant she stepped into the room, the axe vanished from her grasp. Below her, high in a tree, a chimpanzee screamed. Twirling Kendra's axe, the manic primate leaped from his high perch and fell forward toward the ground. So it's like the ground looks like the tree's up high, but it's like backwards, and so he fell out of the tree towards them, like kind of up. The chimpanzee sailed right out of the mosaic painting, materializing in front of Kendra, brandishing the axe. Shrieking, Kendra ran away from the axe-wielding chimp, yanking on her glove. Rushing up from behind the chimpanzee, Warren flung the key just as the screeching ape was beginning to give chase. The key sailed true, striking the frenzied beast between the shoulder blades, and the chimpanzee pitched forward onto the floor, long hand twitching and the axe skidding over the tiny tiles. "Don't pick up the axe," Warren warned. "This chamber is meant to strip us of all of our weapons." "Except the key," Kendra said. Grunting, Warren bent over and retrieved the key again, wiping the spearhead on his pants. "Right," he said. My guess is that to pass this room with any weapon beside the key, we would have to slay every monkey in the mosaic." Kendra looked down. There were hundreds of apes, including dozens of powerful gorillas. "Maybe it was a good thing you didn't have all your gear." Warren smiled ruefully. "Yeah, you're not kidding. Being butchered by monkeys is pretty low on my list of ways to go. Come on." They passed through the archway on the other end of the room and began winding down yet another stairwell. All the stairs were real, and at the bottom they found another open archway, narrower than the previous ones. Warren led the way into a cylindrical room where the floor was hundreds of feet below. Widely spaced sunstones, remember those sunstones that give light, provided sufficient light. A narrow catwalk without railings ringed the top of the room, level with the entrance. The roof bristled with barbed spikes. Kendra saw no way to descend. The walls were smooth and sheer all the way to the bottom, where she could barely make out something in the center of the floor. "I'm not sure we brought enough rope," Warren joked, stepping onto the catwalk. "I believe this is our destination. Are you good with heights?" "Not so good," Kendra said. "Wait here," he said. He walked along the catwalk, testing the air with the key, as if searching for an invisible stairway. Kendra noticed an alcove in the far right of the wide room. When Warren reached the alcove, he removed something from it. He levitated a few feet into the air, glanced up at the spikes above him, and floated back down. "I think I get it," he called. He reached into the alcove again, and there was a bright flash that flung him backwards off the catwalk. Kendra watched breathlessly as Warren plummeted towards the distant floor. He began falling slower, then stopped and started rising. He floated slowly as he drew even with Kendra and finally stopped hovering in the center of the room. In addition to the key, Warren was holding a short white rod. "I can't move side to side," he explained. He floated up close to the spikes, carefully took hold of one, and pushed off, sending himself drifting towards Kendra, moving much the way Kendra pictured astronauts would walk in zero gravity. Warren alighted on the catwalk beside her. The short rod was carved out of ivory. One tip was black. He had been holding the rod parallel to the floor, so like sideways, he'd been holding it like that. I mean, like if this is the rod, it's parallel to the floor, so he's holding it like this, holding it sideways like that. He had been holding the rod parallel to the floor, but now that he stood on the catwalk, he tilted it so the black tip, so it's like the black tip was facing up. That makes you fly? Kendra asked. More like it reverses gravity, he said. Black tip up, gravity pulls down. Black tip down, gravity pulls up. Sideways, you get zero gravity. Tilt the black tip up a little bit, and gravity pulls down a little bit. Got it? "I think so," she said. "Careful on that roof," he warned. "Have you done this before?" she asked. "Never," he said. "You learn to experiment in places like this." He held out the rod. She took it. "I want to try it out on the stairway without the spikes." "Go for it," he said. Kendra went back to the stairway. Slowly she tipped the rod until it was sideways. Nothing felt any different. She jumped slightly and it felt perfectly normal. "I don't think it works out here," she said. "The enchantment must be specific to this room," he said. "Still, strong spell. I've never heard of anything like it. Remember, with the rod, you're changing which way gravity pulls you. If your momentum is going one way, turning the rod won't instantly change your direction. When I was falling and I flipped it over, I slowed, stopped, and then started going up. So if you need to leave yourself room to stop, or you might end up a shish kebab on those spikes on the ceiling." "I'm not going to let myself go fast," Kendra said. "Good idea," Warren said. "And for the record, don't try to grab a second rod. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning." Holding the rod, Kendra followed Warren around the catwalk. She kept the black tip pointing straight up, not wanting to risk drifting up to the spikes. When they reached the alcove, she saw that there were 9 other rods, each resting in a hole black tip up. "What do you say we make sure we can't be followed?" Warren said, grabbing a rod and tossing it off the edge of the catwalk. Instead of falling, the rod floated back to the same hole from which Warren had removed it. He picked up the rod again. When he let go of it, the rod again returned to the hole. "We better hold tight to these or we'll end up stranded down there," Kendra said. Warren nodded, removing a rod for himself. He turned it so the black tip was only slightly upwards and stepped off the edge, falling gently, again making Kendra think of astronauts. Kendra tipped the rod slowly, marveling as she felt the pull of gravity diminishing, even without moving. The sensation was strange. It reminded her of being underwater. Tilting the rod so the black tip was slightly downward, she floated up, her feet leading the catwalk. Tipping the rod the other way a tad. She drifted back down. Now that she trusted the rod, Kendra stepped off the edge of the catwalk and began a mild free fall. The sensation was incredible. She had dreamed of going into space in order to experience zero gravity, and here she was in an underground tower, sampling something much like it. The dizzying drop beneath her feet was no longer very intimidating now that she could control gravity with the twist of her wrist. Warren rose to meet her. "Experiment with the rod," he said. "Nothing too drastic, but get a feel for how to rise and fall and stop yourself. There's a knack to it. I have a feeling it will come in handy before we finish here." Suddenly Warren shot downward. Kendra watched him slow to a stop. "I thought you said nothing too drastic," she called. He rocketed upwards, drawing even with her. "I meant for you," he said, before plunging away below her. Little by little, Kendra tilted the black tip up higher, incrementally increasing the rate of her descent. She abruptly tipped the rod in the other direction, and her descent slowed with a feeling like she was connected to an elastic band. Making the rod parallel with the ground, she brought herself to a standstill about halfway to the floor. Kendra glanced up at the distant spikes in the ceiling. She tilted the black tip all the way down, and with a sudden rush of acceleration, she was shooting up towards the iron stalactites. The sensation was disorienting, exactly like falling headfirst towards the ground, and the spikes came rapidly nearer. In a panic, she whipped the rod the other way. The elastic feeling was much stronger this time, although it took long enough to slow that she got much nearer to the spikes than she liked. Before she knew it, she was careening toward the floor. Her body began rotating, and she lost some sense of which way she needed to turn the rod to slow her fall. She overcorrected several times before gaining control, whipping herself up and down erratically. When she finally leveled out, Kendra was 2/3 of the way to the floor, hovering near the wall. She kicked off gently. "And I thought I was a daredevil," Warren called. That was a little more daring than I had intended," Kendra said, trying not to sound too shaken. She experimented more with rising and falling, growing accustomed to easing herself to a stop and to keeping her body properly oriented. At last she landed softly on the floor next to Warren and normalized the gravity by holding a rod black end up. The room was bare except for a pedestal at the center. The floor was polished, seamless stone. Atop the pedestal sat a lifelike likeness of a black cat made of colored glass. "Is that the artifact?" Kendra asked. "My guess is we're looking at the vault," Warren said. "Do we smash it?" Kendra asked. "Well, that might be a start," Warren said. "How are you feeling?" Kendra asked. "Stabbed," he said, "but functional. Things could turn ugly fast. If it comes to it, you may want to fly up to the catwalk and hope for mercy from the narcoplex. But don't try to exit the tower. I was very serious about the trap set to prevent anyone from exiting prematurely." "Right," Kendra said. "I won't ditch you." Warren tipped the rod somewhat and jumped, soaring over Kendra's head and landing behind her, wincing slightly and clutching his side. "See, you can also simply reduce gravity to your advantage. It could come in handy." Kendra tilted the rod, feeling herself lightening, and then took a leap, gliding in a long, lazy parabola. "Gotcha. You ready?" Warren asked. "What's going to happen?" Kendra said. "Well, I'll smash the cat and we'll see." "What if the roof comes down on us?" she asked. Warren gazed up at the distant ceiling. "Well, that would be bad. Let's hope the spikes are just meant to impale people who are clumsy with their gravity sticks." "You think there may be something scary inside the cat?" Kendra asked. "That seems like a safe bet. We better hurry. Who knows how long before the narcoblix shows up. You ready? Glove on." Kendra pulled on the glove and turned invisible. "Okay." Warren prodded the cat with the sharp end of the key. The tip of the spearhead clinked loudly, but the figurine did not crack. He jabbed it a few times. Clink, clink, clink. "I'm not sure we're meant to break it," he said. Moving closely, Warren touched the cat with his finger and then skipped away, key ready. The glass cat shimmered and became a real cat, mewing softly. It had a tiny key around its neck. Kendra felt some tension leave her. "Gosh, is this some kind of a joke?" she asked. "If so, I don't think we've seen the punchline yet." "Maybe it has rabies," Kendra said. Tentatively, Warren approached the black cat. It hopped down from the pedestal and slunk towards him. Nothing indicated that the feline was anything other than a scrawny domestic cat. Crouching, Warren let the animal lick his hand. He stroked the cat softly, and then untied the ribbon that held the key. Instantly, the cat hissed and swiped upon him. Warren stood and backed away, puzzling over the key. The cat arched its back and showed its teeth. "Well, it turned mean," Kendra said. "It is mean," Warren corrected. "This is certainly no mere house cat. We have not yet seen the true form of our adversary." The feral cat spat and hissed. Warren began investigating the big key. He rolled it, examining it from end to end. "Aha," he said, inserting the tiny key into a hole just below the spearhead. When he turned the minuscule key, the handle at the opposite end of the big key detached and clattered to the ground. Connected to the handle was a long, slender blade. A sword had been hidden in the shaft of the tall key, with only the handle showing. Warren picked up the sword, swishing it through the air. The handle had no guard. The sharp blade was long and sleek, and it flashed dangerously in the glow of the sunstones. "We have ourselves a pair of weapons," Warren said. "You take the spear." The spear. The spear. Without the sword, it has a better balance. Eyes on the cat, Kendra drew near and took the spear from Warren. "How do I use it?" she asked. "You stab with it," Warren said. "It's probably too heavy for you to throw it effectively. Pay more attention to soaring away if trouble comes near." "All right," she says, taking a few practice jabs. Without warning, the cat charged at Kendra. She swung the spear and it veered away, darting towards Warren. His sword whisked down and lopped off the head of the cat. Warren stepped away from the corpse, watching it intently. Both the head and the body of the cat began to boil, as if it was full of writhing worms. The head melted into a soupy pool. The headless body began to heave inside out, revealing wet glimpses of muscle and bone, until the churning finally stopped and the black cat was whole again. The cat hissed at Warren, fur rising along its arched back. It was bigger now, larger than any domestic cat Kendra had ever seen. Warren took a step towards the cat, and it bolted, body stretching long as it raced fluidly away. The next 2 times Warren came close, the cat streaked away, in the end returning to the pedestal. Warren approached the pedestal. Baring teeth and claws, the cat sprang at him. A slash of his sword intercepted the feline, and the cat flopped to the floor. Warren stabbed it to ensure that the animal had a quick demise, and then backed away. Once again, the lifeless body began to pulse and roil. "I'm not too keen about this pattern," Warren said darkly. Moving in close, he began stabbing the churning mass of fur and bone and organs. With each wound, it seemed to grow, and so he retreated to let the process finish. The reborn black cat no longer looked like a domestic animal. Not only was it much too big, the paws were proportionally larger with crueler claws, and the ears were now tufted like those of a lynx. Still entirely black, the lynx let out a fierce yowl, showing intimidating teeth. "Don't kill it again," Kendra said. "It will keep getting worse." "Well, then we will never get the artifact," Warren said. "The cat is the vault, and the sword and the spear remain the keys. To get the artifact, we must defeat all of these versions of the cat." The black lynx crouched, eyeing Warren cunningly. When Warren feinted forward, the lynx did not flinch. Staying low, the lynx prowled toward Warren, as if stalking a bird. Warren stood ready, sword poised. A dark blur, the lynx rushed at him, low and silent. The sword flashed, opening a gash, but the lynx got through, clawing and biting furiously at Warren's pant leg. A fierce return stroke ended the fury of claws. The lynx lay motionless. "Fast," Warren complained, limping away, blood dripping from his tattered pant leg. "Did it hurt you bad?" Kendra asked. "Surface wounds. My pants got the worst of it," Warren said, "but it got to me. And I'm not sure I like what that says about my reflexes." The hide of the carcass began to bulge. "Would the spear be better?" Kendra asked. "You could stab it before it gets close." "Maybe," Warren said. "Trade me." He crossed to her and they exchanged weapons. "You're limping," she said. "Yeah, it's a little tender," he said. "I'll hold up." The lynx yowled a heartier, more powerful sound. As it stood on all fours, its head was higher than the bandage on Warren's stomach. "Big cat," Kendra said. "Yeah, kitty, kitty, kitty," Warren coaxed, edging towards it with the spear. The beefed-up lynx began pacing, staying out of range, moving with sure grace, hunting for an opening. The lynx darted at Warren and then pulled back. It faked a second charge, and Warren danced backwards. Why am I starting to feel more and more like a mouse?" Warren complained. He lunged forward, thrusting with the spear, but the lynx sprang to one side and received only a glancing blow before streaking towards Warren, low and impossibly quick, inside the reach of the spear. Warren jumped high into the air. The lynx instantly wheeled around and raced towards Kendra. Invisible or not, the animal knew her exact location. She reversed the rod and shot upwards as well, coming to a stop 50 feet above the floor. After halting her ascent, Kendra did not turn invisible. It was impossible to reach a complete standstill in the air. No matter how she held the rod, there was always a slight drifting that apparently prevented the glove from working. Warren hovered about 20 feet above her, glaring at the lynx. He glanced up at Kendra, and then his eyes fixed on something beyond her. "We've got company," he said. "What? Who could the company be?" Kendra looked up and saw Vanessa and Errol gliding down the catwalk. "What do we do?" Kendra asked. Swinging the spear to ward off the lynx, Warren dropped to the ground and jumped at an angle that let him float near to Kendra. "Give me the sword," he said. "I propose a truce," Vanessa called down to them airily, as if it was all just a game. Kendra handed Warren the sword. He gave her the spear. The exchange caused them to slowly drift apart. Convenient idea, since we have the weapons," Warren growled. "How many times have you slayed the Guardian?" Vanessa asked. "None of your business," Warren said. "Come no closer." She stopped, hovering with Errol beside her. Errol's suit was torn. One of his eyes was purple and swollen shut, and there were scratches on his cheeks. "You do not look well, Warren," Vanessa said. "And neither does your friend," he replied. "I think you two could use some assistance," Vanessa said. "What got him?" Warren asked. "The hobgoblin." Vanessa smiled. "He was injured before he reached the tower." "I picked up a bar of gold on the back porch," Errol said. "Apparently it was stolen from a troll, and he took it back very impolitely after we left the yard." That's funny, because who did that? Oh, Seth. That was Seth's fault. Kendra covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Errol glared at her. "Your real name is Christopher Vogel?" Kendra asked. "I have many names," he said stiffly. "My parents gave me that one." "We elected to fight the Cyclops," Vanessa said. "Lots of bear skin for my darts. And we deduced from the axe and the ape not to enter the nearby chamber armed. But this cat may pose a problem. How many times has it died? We've seen once." "Well, you better turn around and clear out of here," Warren said. "I hope you aren't counting on other help," Vanessa said. "We found Tanu in the woods and took care of him. He will be asleep until this time tomorrow morning." "I'm surprised you came in person," Kendra said bitterly. "Well, where finesse is required, I prefer my own body," Vanessa said. "We have no intention of harming anyone," Errol said. "Kendra, we just want to take the artifact and leave all of you in peace. This can still end well for you and your family." With a flick of his wrist, Warren soared up to their level. "Sorry if we're out of reach," Vanessa said. Although hovering at the same height, they were separated by a good distance. "Either you will depart, or I will emphatically insist," Warren said, raising the sword menacingly. "We could fight," Errol said calmly, "but trust me, brave as she may be, it would not take much for me to wrest that lance from the girl." Errol pushed off of Vanessa so that both of them drifted over to opposite walls. They landed softly against the wall, staying near enough to control their direction by pushing off. "A contest between us will end in injuries none of us can afford," Vanessa said. "Why not first slay the beast together?" "Because I don't want to be stabbed in the back," Warren said. "You don't imagine you can walk out of here without the artifact," Errol said. "There are always safeguards against such actions." "I am well aware," Warren said. "I can handle cats." "How many times have you killed the beast?" Vanessa asked. "3 times," Warren said. "So this is its 4th life," Errol said. "Hang me if it has less than 9. "At your best, uninjured, this guardian is too much for you or any single person," Vanessa said. "Altogether, we may have a chance." "I will not arm you," Warren said. Vanessa nodded at Errol. Both of them dropped rapidly along the wall until they were level with Kendra. Warren fell with them, but without a way to control his lateral movement, he could not intervene. Vanessa and Errol kicked off the wall, floating towards Kendra. She tilted the rod, floating upwards, and Vanessa and Errol adjusted to float upwards with her. They were approaching her from opposite directions. At best, she could poke one of them with a spear. Warren had lowered himself almost to the ground, but the fierce lynx was keeping him from touching the ground. He swatted at it with a sword. In a panic, with Vanessa and Errol closing in, Kendra tossed the spear towards Warren, yelling, "Catch!" The spear turned end over end and narrowly missed piercing Warren before it clanged to the floor beside the lynx. Yowling, the overgrown cat guarded the spear, fangs bared. Vanessa and Errol plunged to the ground in pursuit of the fallen weapon. Errol struck the floor much harder than he might have intended, and he crumbled. Vanessa landed perfectly. It was claw against sword as Warren lowered himself toward the snapping, hissing lynx. Vanessa dashed towards the lynx across the floor. Kendra saw a little white stick fly by her on its way to the top of the room and realized Errol had dropped his rod. With Vanessa approaching from behind and Warren slicing it from above, the lynx darted away, ignoring Vanessa and racing towards Errol, who was rising shakily. Vanessa dove and grabbed the spear at the same time as Warren. Errol screamed, hobbling hopelessly away from the charging lynx, favoring his right leg. Warren released the spear and jumped towards where the lynx was about to converge with Errol. Vanessa sprinted across the floor. The lynx sprang, and Errol vanished, reappearing a few feet off to one side. The lynx landed and swerved to stay after Errol. Spreading his hands and backing away, Errol created a puff of smoke and a blazing shower of sparks. As the undaunted lynx sprang through the fiery flash, Errol raised his arms defensively. The heavy lynx knocked Errol down and began mauling his forearms, shaking and dragging him. Vanessa arrived before Warren and buried the spear deep into the animal's side. Warren alighted beside her and decapitated the lynx, so he cut his head off. Kendra looked on from above in hypnotized horror. She had no love for Errol, but watching anyone get mauled like that was a terrible thing, and it all happened so quickly. Smoke curled up from where the sparks had singed the lynx. "Hurry, get him another gravity stick," Vanessa cried. "You can only hold one at a time," Warren said, stepping towards her. "Then back off," Kendra panted, holding up the spear defensively. Warren soared into the air. The dead lynx was churning. The severed head was melting. Vanessa glanced upwards as if considering racing for a stick. After all, and looked at the roiling corpse. "Errol, get up," she commanded. Dazed, the injured magician rose, standing on one leg, his tattered sleeve a bloody ruin. "On my back," she said, turning. He climbed up piggyback, and Vanessa bounded into the air. She rose about 20 feet before slowing and stopping and drifting back towards the ground. The black tip of the rod was pointed straight down, but still she descended. The revived cat roared. The head was shaped differently, and the body was much more muscular. The cat was now a panther. "Errol's bigger than her," Warren whispered to Kendra. "Gravity is pulling them down and her up, but he's heavier." Warren compressed his lips. "Hand in the rod," he shouted. Vanessa, struggling, either didn't hear or didn't care. "Let go of me," she demanded. Errol clung to her desperately. "Don't look," Warren said. Kendra closed her eyes. The panther leaped, claws raking Errol and dragging him and Vanessa to the floor. Errol lost his hold and Vanessa took off like a missile, escaping unscathed as the panther killed Errol. Vanessa shot past Warren and Kendra, then slowed and descended, hovering not far from them. "I have the spear, you have the sword," she said, panting, her voice slightly unsteady. "The Guardian probably has several more lives. How about that truce?" "Why did you betray us?" Kendra accused. "One day I will serve all who rule. I do no more harm than I must. At present our needs align. We must defeat the Guardian to escape this place, and neither of us will succeed alone." "And once we have the artifact," Warren asked, "well, we'll be fortunate enough to be alive. And to have reached the next crossroads," Vanessa said. "I can give you no more assurances." "Defeating this Guardian will be no small task," Warren admitted. "What do you say, Kendra?" Two sets of eyes were on Kendra. "Well, I don't trust her." "Yeah, it's a little late for that," Vanessa said. "You were supposed to be my teacher and my friend," Kendra said. "I really liked you." Vanessa grinned. "Of course you liked me. In the spirit of teaching, here's a final piece of instruction. I used the same approach when we met as Errol did. I rescued you from the setup of the threat. I visited your town in the night before the kobold showed up at your school and bit your homework teacher while she slept. Later, the kobold put a tack on her chair just to put her asleep, and then I took over and I gave you quite a scare." "That was you?" Kendra said. "We had to make sure that you had ample reason to accept Errol's help. And then, once you realized Errol was a threat, I came to your rescue." "And what happened to Case?" Kendra asked. "The kobold? Oh, he's off on some new mission, I presume. His purpose was merely to alarm you." "Is Mrs. Price all right?" "Oh, she'll be fine, I'm sure," Vanessa said. "We meant her no harm. She was just a means to an end." "I'm not sure I get the moral of this lesson," Warren said. "Don't trust people who help you?" "More like, be careful who you trust," Vanessa said. "And don't cross the society. We're always a step ahead." "So we shouldn't team up," Kendra said.